Hi, I'm Greg Hunter. This is the weekly news wrap up for Friday, October 6th, 2017, the WNW 304. And this thing that happened in Las Vegas, I'm kind of compelled to start with it. But I've been saving this headline all week long. You know how I've been telling you that this is really a battle between good and evil. It's not Republican and Democrat and liberal, conservative or communist, which is what Democrats really are, basically at their whole core, against constitutionalists. It really is a battle between good and evil, light and dark, Jesus and the devil, God and Lucifer. However you want to frame it, but it's so unbelievably evil. And I don't mean just from single individuals. I mean, the people at the top who believe and worship the devil. When I saw this headline, and this is from the president, an act of pure evil, I just thought, perfectly framed, and bravo, Mr. President. It was an act of pure evil. And I'm not sure it was an act of just one person either. That's what the mainstream media is pushing, but I'll get into that in just a second. I have a lot of smart people, I have a lot of good Christians on the site, and they've been watching me talk about this battle between good and evil, light, dark, whatever, and then a couple of people popped up and sent me this Ephesians 6:12, and I thought, wow, the Bible, the greatest book on the planet. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Framed perfectly in the most predictive and greatest book ever written, the Bible. And so, I can't solve, this Las Vegas madman, this terror attack, coordinated terror attack. They want you to believe, the mainstream press, including Fox, that it was one shooter. And I don't buy it. I'm sorry. And there's just too much cell phone camera video. There's just too many eyewitnesses. There's too many stinking details and major unanswered questions. Here's one, though. Let's just get it. Breaking. Sheriff says Vegas shooter may have been radicalized. FBI found Antifa and Islamic material in room. That is from the sources from InfoWars. And they're putting a lid on that, according to Alex Jones. He says his sources are angry that they're not coming out and saying this guy was tied to Antifa and tied to ISIS. Here's a Las Vegas sheriff. It says, you got to assume the shooter had help as mystery woman emerges. And I'm not so sure it's just from her. I mean, there's video. You've seen the video of the lower floor machine gun firing, like the third, fourth floor. This is supposed to happen. This was all supposed to be done out of the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Hotel. And there, people are writing that off as just a reflection. Really, who made that ascertainment? Who came up with the scientific paperwork that said that was a reflection? A reflection off of what? I mean, the Luxor Hotel is what stands out in front of it where all this carnage happened. It's a pyramid. How would that reflect back to the... And there's video. And sound. Shot from a cab driver. Also eyewitnesses. Lots of questions. And here's my question. I mean, this thing happens on Sunday night. Monday morning, fairly early, multiple news agencies are reporting this. Las Vegas, FBI says Las Vegas shooter had no connection to international terrorist group. This is the Washington Times. No connection to international terrorist group. How did they know that? How in the world did they know that? As far as I know, they hadn't been to Paddock's home, which is 80 miles north, his other home. They didn't interview anybody. Didn't interview the girlfriend. She was in the Philippines. The Attorney General of Nevada says it took 9 days to clear the Pulse nightclub crime scene, to process it. Isn't this area out in front of the hotel in between that and the Luxor Hotel? Isn't that a little bit bigger than the Pulse nightclub? And yet they knew the next morning early without any ascertainment of hard drives, computers, emails. They take a picture of the front of every letter that goes in front of the post office. Do you mean they had contacted the NSA? They contacted the post office. They got all the information and said, no connection whatsoever. Preposterous. There's no way they could have done that. And then you have the Islamic State, saying that he's one of ours. He converted 6 months ago, and doubling down and tripling down that Paddock is a convert. He's one of ours. And here we have the Islamic State newsletter claims a Vegas shooter was soldier of caliphate. And yet, they keep saying, well, there's no evidence for that. I heard the Attorney General of Nevada say, well, there's no public evidence. Well, what do you think the investigations are for? Just what they can see in the public and what's on Facebook? Or do they go in and do a deep dive? See if there was, collusion. There was, coordination with ISIS. There was definitely coordination. You don't have that many guns, kill that many people, have that many eyewitnesses, have video of other machine guns going off, and that be one crazy guy. I mean, listen, if he'd have driven, heaven forbid everybody do this, but if he'd have driven his car into the middle of the crowd and started shooting, yeah, maybe one crazy guy. No. This is not one crazy guy. This was a coordinated terror attack on people that like country music, and probably 98% of them voted for Donald Trump. So I had lots of questions. Here's another question. A woman running through the audience screaming out that you're all going to die. I think that's bizarre. Here's another bizarre happening, and that's this 4chan user. I sort of read the notes on 4chan. Warned about the Vegas attack on September 11th. 3 weeks ago, on the 16th anniversary of 9/11, a 4chan user predicted Las Vegas shooting in a series of mysterious posts. I mean, he was being very specific. Lots of questions. I can't solve this. But it sure seems to me like it's just more than one crazy guy on antidepressants that kicked out some hotel room windows and killed all these people. Puerto Rico, that was the big story until this one happened. And listen, as far as I'm concerned, Puerto Rico is the dead canary in the coal mine on the floor of the mine. I've been harping on Puerto Rico and what kind of a problem it is. Here is Puerto Rico is running out of money. And I remember now, they defaulted on $74 billion in debt. And just for some reference, North Carolina has about $5 billion in debt. With a 10 million population, Puerto Rico defaulted on $74 billion in debt with 3.5 million people. Tell me there's not fraud there. The leaders, the Puerto Rican people are good. The leaders, they screwed them. But read this. This is a Bloomberg story. Puerto Rico faces a government shutdown October 31st. Hey, happy Halloween. This is what happens when you run out of other people's money. And then we have this here. If Congress doesn't send money, it'll be a disaster. I mean, they defaulted on this debt, and everybody went tee-hee, ha-ha, you got screwed. Then they have this hurricane. Now they need money. There's a package. Supposedly it's going to be, $29 billion. I wouldn't let that package go unless they agree to a major forensic accounting and a major investigation on what happened to all that money, and people would go to jail at the top. But whatever. Then you have this, and I want you to sink in, to take this in. And I've talked about this before, about how what happened with Donald Trump. He became the poster child for the coolest guy and the richest guy in the 80s. And in the 1990s, got killed in the real estate downturn. And he renegotiated his debt way down. And here we have Donald Trump down in Puerto Rico. And Puerto Rico bonds crashed to record low after Trump says debt may need to be wiped out. Now, let that sink in, folks, for a roadmap of what's going on. That is how your president thinks. And I'm not so sure that's a wrong way to think. If he tries to pay off all the debt, where does it stop? When does the currency hyperinflate? I know debt destruction and defaulting on debt is also terrible. There's a guy, a money manager, Dan Schaefer, on Fox Business, and he says, listen, they're trying to create inflation. Sound familiar? That's what Jim Rickard says. They're trying to create inflation because, all these sovereign countries have to pay this money. I mean, back to Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico reached a point, even with 2 or 3%, whatever crazy interest rate they had out with $74 billion, they couldn't make the interest payments, let alone the principal payments. They couldn't make the payments. The debt got so big they just couldn't make the payments. And that's what the Fed, as Jim Rickard said, also Dan Schaefer, he says they're scared to death that this is going to be a daisy chain of defaults, and not just, you look at Puerto Rico and multiply that by all kinds of sovereign nations, third world nations, around the world that can't make the payment. So they need the inflation to, inflate the debt away. And so, this is the hard world of what happens when you run out of other people's money. And please take note of what the president said about, hey, the debt needs to be wiped out. That means all those bondholders, they do not get made whole. That means all the bondholder held by the debt held by private individuals and pension funds, poof, be gone. Bye-bye. And then when Puerto Rico does have to, and they will someday have to borrow money. Right now they need to borrow money. They're just going to get a government package. That's not going to make them whole. But they're going to need to borrow money. Can you imagine what the terms are going to be? Can you imagine what the terms are going to be? Not 3%, 2%. Oh, yeah, you don't have to pay any taxes. It'll be like getting 4%. No, it won't be that. Another story that was basically taken out, and I think this is an amazing story, and it came with satellite images and video, and it's an amazing story. And listen, I wouldn't bring this up if this hasn't been backed up by multiple other sources in multiple other years. I've been talking about this for years, about how the U.S. was arming ISIS overtly, covertly. The oil never was cut off. I complained about that years ago. Complained about the pickup truck that got sold out of Houston and went to Turkey and then ended up in Syria under the auspices or under the control of ISIS. With a 50 caliber machine gun mounted on the back of it. I think it was A1 Mark Plumbing or something like that. Nothing to do with the plumbing company now. But this is a used truck they mounted a machine gun on that came from America. And they never did cut off the oil, afraid of the nightmare, bomb their wellheads. Oil will stay on the ground. Anyway, here's the Russian military saying that Russian military accuses U.S. of supporting ISIS. That's an unbelievable a charge. And it should have made news all over the world. It should have made news all over the country. And nobody even bothered to refute this in the Trump administration. And this was going on long before Trump took office. And then if you take a look at this is, the main thing, this is according to the Russians, the main thing preventing the final defeat of ISIS in Syria, American colleagues. That's what's stopping the defeat of ISIS. And, I can see why the United States doesn't want to have Russia winning, and then Iran has their troops there. The Supreme Leader wrote a book on how to wipe out Israel, and Hezbollah would love to wipe out Israel, and Hamas would love to wipe out Israel, and Israel is a big ally of the United States, and, I don't know, can you see why they were trying to keep this going with ISIS? It's wrong. It's evil. But when ISIS goes, I think that could be we're just going to be that much closer to World War III in the Middle East. Iran wants to destroy, and this is no longer, you misinterpreted. The Supreme Leader wrote a book on how to destroy Israel and outsmart the U.S. But, the U.S. helping ISIS after all this, we're against ISIS. It comes with satellite images, and they go into great detail on how they think the U.S. is helping ISIS. And a lot of other evidence says we armed them. They overtly, covertly, however you like to put it, but we armed them. There were no, free Syrian, there was no free Syrian army maybe a long time ago. The rebels were ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Anyway, another thing I wanted to get with you on that before I get to this is what Rickards was talking about, this window of time. between the 10th of October and the 21st. I know a lot of people say, oh, he's a CIA shill, whatever. Listen, I think he's a smart guy. And he's a 4-time best-selling author, and he was kind enough to come and spend an hour with me to give you guys his perspective. He can't be all wrong. He's a 4-time best-selling author. And, all of a sudden I'm looking and my bank is closed on Monday, which is Columbus Day. And then here we have this is on Drudge, a CIA official predicts North Korea provocation on Columbus Day. And what did Jim Rickards say? The 10th, which is the anniversary, October 10th, the anniversary of the establishment of the Communist Party in North Korea. And then on the 21st, when we have this big naval exercise that will include the super aircraft carrier, the Ronald Reagan, that we'll be doing with the South Koreans. And he said that's a time frame, a window that there could be a zig when somebody should have zagged. So that's just more fuel to the fire. I wanted to bring this up because how long have I been hearing for years is what's the real amount the Chinese have in terms of their gold reserves? And it's one of the biggest secrets ever. For the longest time, their official reserve was something like 1,000 tons, right? And the U.S. has a little more than 8,000 tons. Well, now Reuters reports, which is from the Chinese news agency, which is basically a double confirmation, in my opinion, China proven gold reserves at 12,100 tons at the end of 2016. 12,100 tons at the end of 2016. A tightly held secret, no longer held. But about 4,000 tons more than the U.S. claims to hold. Some people say the U.S. doesn't have any. But let's just take them at their face value. You mean the number 2 economy in the world now has, 4,000 tons more of the yellow metal than the U.S.? Why are they releasing that now? Why did they pick now to release that sort of information? Something's up. And I don't think it's going to be dollar positive. If you take a look at the last thing I wanted to get to, and this is the people I thought this was kind of funny. I've been harping on how unfair everything was. People think, oh, you're a Trump supporter. Well, listen, I am a supporter of the truth, and when the truth is that lopsided, then it is, as I've been telling you, propaganda, information, especially of a biased, misleading nature, used to promote or publicize a particular publication, cause, or point of view. Propaganda. Now, isn't that what the mainstream press is doing? Propaganda. You can't get around it. And then we have this in NBC, and I think, oh, wow, this is rich. NBC's headline. Trump's right. His media coverage is mostly negative. And this is only 5% was positive, and this is a big research project by the Pew Research Center. Only 5% positive, which means you can't have that much negative news on just one individual. No other president, or Barack Obama, he didn't have negative news stories, but this is off the charts. I mean, there's nobody even close to having this kind of negative coverage. I mean, if you look at George Bush 41, George Bush 43, not anywhere near the negative coverage that Donald Trump has. I mean, this is again the deep state, the Luciferians. Against Christians and Jesus, basically. That's about the only way you can frame this. I do have Rick Wiles. I mean, I was at a real loss for who am I going to have on? I mean, I'm always praying that I'll pick the right person and he'll give the right information and he'll enlighten people and guide people, the person I have on, and I say the same prayers for myself. And, I got Rick Wiles, who is the founder of True News. He is the pastor of the Flowing Streams Christian Church down in Vero Beach, but founder of True News, very big outlet. He's got big announcements to do now television on satellite. And other forums, and he's going to get bigger and bigger. And he was kind enough to come on and talk about the battle between good and evil. And he dropped some bombs on what he thinks is going to happen. And he's been covering this a long time. He does many interviews a lot of different people than I do. He's a more religious. He's a pastor, good guy, smart guy though. And but he gives a real perspective on this battle between good and evil. He is the early Sunday release Rick Wiles, founder of True, TRU News. .com. Rick Wiles is the guest for the early Sunday release. I want to thank you all for supporting USA Watchdog with your comments and your donations. That helps us out. Remember, please prepare yourself mentally, physically, above all spiritually. Fear not, God the Father and his Son, Jesus Christ, are firmly in control.